Hey guys, so this is going to be the final review for this unit of polynomials. So let's go over a couple of ways that we are going to factor. So as you can see in this chart, we're going to see, okay, what can we do to factor? What if there's 2 terms, 3 terms, or 4 terms? So let's start out with what if there are 2 terms? So 2 terms mean there's only 2 variables, 2 numbers, 2 things going on. So we have 3 different options we can use: difference of squares, sum of cubes, and difference of cubes. All 3 of them have an equation to go by and a formula that you can really easy just plug and chug. So let's look at the first one, difference of squares. You know you can use it with when both of your values here are like able to be squared. So let's take a look at this example over here. My a squared value would be x squared, but my a value would just be x. My b squared value would be 9, and what times what is 9? 3. So I would just plug in these values into my equation over here. So that would look like, so if I would write it right here, I would have x plus 3 and x minus 3. Not that bad. Let's go ahead and look at the sum of cubes. So sum of cubes, you know you are doing it if both your values are cubes and we are adding. Sum means that I am adding both of them. So let's take a look at this one right here. My a cubed, I'm getting a cubed and everything from these this formula right here, so that's where I'm getting that from. So a cubed, what is my a? It would be my first value, which is x cubed, so x cubed. Just my a alone would be x. B cubed is 8, so what times what times what is 8? Same number would be 2. 2 times 2 is 4, times another 2 would be 8. So let's plug those in right here. So here I have 8, the x cubed plus 8. So I know my a value is x, so I plug that in, plus whatever my b value is, 2. Then a squared. Well, what's a squared? X. So I would just write x squared. A times b. Okay, well, negative, right? Minus. A times b would be x times 2. We can't combine them anyway, so we would just write 2x. Plus b squared. So what is b squared? 4. And that's it. Let me highlight these so we can see. And then let's look at this last one of difference of cubes. Now, since we already went over the basics of cubes and its formula, let's take a look if both of them had a variable. So our a cubed, which is our first value again, is 64x cubed. So that means my a would be what? 4x. Now, yes, it does have an x because this x has to be uncubed. So here it is. And then 4 times 4 is 16. 16 times 4 would be 4. Let's look at my b value. So b cubed would be 8y. This one also has a variable. Unlike the previous one where 8 did not have a variable, this one does. So we have to include it in our b value. So 2, because we know that from the previous one, and y. We have to add that y. So again, let me write it up here. 64x cubed minus 8y cubed. So I would put my a value, which is 4x minus 2y, my b value. Then a squared. Well, what's a squared? 4 times 4 would be 16, and then that x times x would be x squared. Plus a times b. Well, they kind of don't combine my x and y, but I can multiply my 4 and my 2, my constants. So what would that be? 8xy. And last, b squared. So what is b times b? Well, 2 times 2 is 4, and y times y is y squared. And that's it for this one. Excuse me. That's how you know when you are going to be factoring with two terms. Let's take a look at what we do when we have to factor with three terms. So there's kind of two bullet points that say factor mentally. If you can do that, that's awesome, that's great. But some of us need a little more steps. So let's take a look at what it's supposed to look like. There's three terms like this. So a squared plus or minus b squared plus or minus plus or minus bx, sorry. And so let's take a look at an example. So x squared minus 9x plus 8. First thing we're going to do is multiply my a and my c value. What is my a value? 1. My c value is 8. 1 times 8 is 8. Now, I'm going to find factors of 8. What times what equals 8? 1 times 8 equals 8. 2 times 4 equals 8. 3 times nothing. 4 times 2, but we already repeated. So we're done. Excuse me. Now, I have to choose one of these pair factors that add or subtract to give me 9. So 2 plus 4 is 6. That's not 9. 1 plus 8 is 9. So these are the ones I'm going to go with, 1 and 8. I'm going to set up my parentheses here. Okay, I write my x's in front, and I write my values no matter what order they are. It has to be the lowest number and then the greatest number. So the lowest number here is 1, and the greatest number is 8. Now to get our signs. What you are going to do, always, if you have both of these in the correct spot, you're going to get the value of b, which is a negative, and send it over to the second parentheses. So the value of b is negative. Then you're going to ask yourself, what is a negative times a positive? It is negative. So that's answer that you say is going to be right here. So whatever a negative times the c value is, whatever the c value, that is going to be in your first parentheses. Last, what you do is you say, hey, I have to divide my answer by my a value. So what is my a value? 1. So I divide both of my factors by that number, so it happens to be 1. So nothing really changes, but let's say it was a 5 or a 2, I would have to divide that number. If so, what you would have to do is reduce them. So if 1 divided by 2, let's say if a was 2, this doesn't really reduce. So what you would do is you would send that number to the front of our x value. But in this case, it doesn't have that problem, so we have our answer. Remember, this is just a review. Excuse me. So that's how you do it if you have 3 terms. Let's take a look if there are 4 terms. You are going to be factoring by grouping. So this is one of the methods we learned this unit. So let's take a look at an example. So first, you have to know that there's 4 numbers. There's x cubed, x, and a constant. So let's take a look at an example here. 24x cubed plus 8x squared plus 12x plus 4. What I am going to do first is I'm going to draw a line in between 2 factors. So 2 of them on the left, 2 of them on the right. Then I'm going to ask myself, on this side, what are they both have in common? Any x's, and are they both divisible by something? Anything. So let's start with numbers. What are they both divisible by? 8. So I'm going to pull out an 8. So 24 divided by 8 is 3. I didn't mess with any of my x's, so I'm going to keep them there. 8 divided by 8 is 1, and I didn't mess with x's, so that's it. Now I mess with my x's, so I have how many x's in common? From both of these terms, what do they have in common? How many x's? This one has 3 and this one has 2. So they both have 2 in common. So we can pull out 2 x's. So if I started off with 3, took away 2, how many do I have left? 1. But I have to bring down that 3 because I never messed with it. Had 2, took away 2, I am left with none. So bring down that 1 because I never messed with it. And then I'm done with that side. What about this side? On the right side, what can I factor out? What can I pull out that they both have in common? What are they both divisible by? 4. So I'm going to pull out a 4. 12 divided by 4 is 3. Didn't mess with that x, so I leave it alone. 4 divided by 4 is 1. That's it. You know you're done when you have 2 terms in common. You see how these are exactly the same? That's when you know you are done. So what you're going to do is you're going to write that term that's in common once, and then your outside ones, so your outside ones are these, this 4 and this 8x squared. That is going to be its own term, its own parentheses over here. So we have 8x squared plus 4. And this is your answer. This is how you factor by grouping when you have 4 terms. Excuse me. So this is how you factor. This is a couple of ways that you can do it. So let's just go over something else that is fundamental. Let's go over how to basically add, subtract, multiply, and divide some polynomial operations. So for addition, it's pretty simple. All you have to do, if you have colors, you can use them during the test. I don't mind. It helps a lot of people. You can combine and all the like terms together. So I have both of my x squares. Those are in blue. My x's are in red, and then my constants are in green. So all you have to do for addition is combine all the like terms. So 2x squared plus 2x would just be 3x. We are not combining any of the powers. That has nothing to do with addition in polynomials in this operation. So all you do is add the constant from. So 2 plus 1. That would make it 3. 3x minus 5x would be negative 2x. And then 2 minus 5 would be 3. Then let's look at subtraction. So what you are going to do first is you are going to say, hey, I need to distribute out that negative. So see how this negative went to all 3 terms on this side? You are going to do that. And you're going to notice that all of these values end up flipping. So my positive x squared became negative, my negative x, 4x became positive, and my positive 1 became negative. Then I do the same thing that I did in addition, and I just combine all my like terms. 2x squared minus x squared would just be 1x squared. X plus 4x would just be 5x. Negative 4, negative 1 would be negative 5. Let's take a look at multiplication. There's a couple of ways you can do this. There's a FOILing method, which is pretty self-explanatory. You can distribute out your factors. This method here, where it's multiplying everything you know, so all the same constants, so negative 4 and 5 would be negative 20. c cubed and c would be c4. So when you multiply, what you are doing is you're adding your exponents. So when you multiply, you add exponents. So let me write that, exponents. Excuse me. And here what we are doing is when we have something to a power, that means our parentheses is going to be written that many times. So in this case, it's a twice. So I wrote it twice, and then we do the same thing we did over here. Just for reference, so a cubed times a cubed is a6. What we are doing is we're adding the exponents. So 3 plus 3 would be 6. And in this example, 2x squared times x would be 2x cubed. Now, 2 times the constant in front of k is 2. So if you had something like 4x cubed times 12x, just 12x, 4 times 12 would be 48. And then that's what you are multiplying. And then x cubed times x would be x to the 4th. Excuse me. There's also this where you have a binomial and a trinomial, and you have to multiply everything across. So my 2x multiplies with every single term in the trinomial, and then my -1 multiplies with all those terms as well. And you get a pretty long equation, but then you have to simplify it. So I have to add all my x squares, all my x's, and anything else in between. And then last is long division. So we did a much simpler way of doing it. So here's how you do it. First thing you have to do is get your denominator and set it equal to 0. Once you solve for x, you are going to put that number in a box. Then, next step you are going to do is you are going to get the coefficients of your numerator. So the coefficients are the numbers in front of your x values or just a single constant. So in this case, it would be 1, -5, 4, and -2. You have to make sure you have a space for each and every single one of your values. So if I start off with x cubed, I need to make sure I have x squared and x and a constant. So like in this example, we start off with x cubed, x squared, and then a constant. There is no x. So what we did is we filled in a gap for that number. We said, hey, that's 0. It needs a space. That's going to come important very later. So next, what you do, this is the pretty quick part, so pay attention. So what you do is you bring down the first value, whatever it is. So in this case, it's 1. Excuse me. Then 1 times 2 is 2. And you're going to put it in the spot next to it. Then you're going to ask yourself, what is -5 plus 2? -3. And you start the process again. -3 times 2 is -6. I add these two up. It's -2. -2 times 4 is -4. I add these two up, and it's -6. Pretty easy. All right, so far so good. Now, what I have to do is say, okay, I'm almost done with this dividing. Now, last thing I have to do is add variables to it. So if I started off with an x cubed, I'm always going to have 1 power less. So that means I'm going to have x squared. So here, up here, I wrote what the values should be for each constant, for each number, sorry. So my first one should be x squared, so 1x squared. My next one should be x minus 3x, because it was -3. Next one is going to be just my number. So it's just my number. And if you have any, you will have a remainder. What you do with your remainder is you add it, and then you divide by your denominator, whatever that denominator is. And then you're done. Just to recap, if you have one that when your box is a fraction, last step before you get to adding all your constants and stuff, what you are gonna wanna do is divide each constant by that denominator. So in this case, it was 3, so I divided all of them by 3, and then I got my real answer. And this is it. You can use this on the exam if you remember, but these two papers, the factoring flowchart and the polynomial operation notes, if you have them, you may use them on the test. Good luck.